So the first time that I encountered the idea of rights of nature, I was deep in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I was working with the indigenous people of Sarayaku in the Amazon that some of you may have visited. Ecuador had recently become the first country in the world to recognize the rights of nature in its constitution. Yeah. And the Sarayaku had been essential in shaping that idea. It was there that I had a chance to say with Don Sabino Walinga, who at the time was the Yashak or shaman of the community. He died, sadly, at age 103 a couple of years ago. We sat by the Bobonasa River just days before the Sarayaku won a historic legal victory. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruled in the favor of the indigenous community and ended a 2-decade-long struggle to stop oil extraction in the territory. The territory is today still free from oil extraction. But Don Sabino didn't speak to me about rights. He spoke about life. I remember him saying, the forest is alive, the rivers and the mountains are alive, there are people just like us. And he said this in a voice so soft that it felt like an invitation to listen to the voices of life all around us. I've had the honor to work with the Sarayaku community ever since, and this is a clip from the sounds of the forest in the same spot that I interviewed Don Sabino Walinga a while ago. But back then, I was fully immersed in the work of human rights. I would go to places teeming with life, not only in the Amazon, but also working with climate refugee communities on coastal areas of Bangladesh, or with the victims of violence and in the armed conflict of my own native country of Colombia. To me, nature felt more like a backdrop to the real work at hand, which was defending human communities. And also, I have to confess that the idea of rights of nature initially baffled me. I didn't really know what to do with it, what to think of it. And yet, it stayed with me over the years. Like a seed planted in Sarayaku, it grew. But it didn't grow only in my own work and my own experience, but across the world. Today, there are more than 500 initiatives protecting the rights of nature around the world. Rivers have been granted rights in countries ranging from, yes, in countries ranging from New Zealand to Peru to Spain. Courts have recognized the rights of animals on most continents. And entire ecosystems have been protected as legal subjects. For instance, in 2021, the Constitutional Court of Ecuador handed down a historic ruling that protected the forest of Los Cedros, or the cedars, as a subject of rights and banned mining in this land, in this pristine land. It's an old-growth forest located in one of the most biodiverse regions of the world. I've been involved in monitoring the implementation of that ruling. Working with the former judges and the advocates and the forest guardians, I have had the privilege to see how rights of nature do make a difference on the ground. But rather than telling you about this forest, I want to invite you to listen to it. I want you all to hear what a rights-bearing, breathing, living cloud forest sounds like. First time I was there at Los Cedros, I was with my friend and generous colleague, Cosmo Sheldrake, who produces music with sounds of nature. He weaves the sounds of oceans, of landscapes, or of whales and other beings into beautiful music. And he recorded, among many other clips, this one that I want to share with you. I wonder if you figured out what those flapping sounds were at the beginning of the clip. Those are the bats that would fly around us at night. And perhaps you also heard the toucan barbets, the howler monkeys, the crickets and the trees that compose the orchestra of the forest at dawn. By the way, Cosmo insists to this day that he can hear my faint snoring in the background in that later clip, which being a lawyer, I roundly deny, and I'm sure that no one here picked up any noise of that sort. But it's not just indigenous peoples or professional listeners who are engaged in this exercise in paying close attention to the more than human world. We're in the midst of a planetary listening exercise. Botanists are busy studying how plants emit sounds, how insects pick them up, and how those insects, like moths, make decisions based on that information. Marine biologists and technologists are busy revealing the languages of whales and other species. Artists and designers work with sounds of nature and with images of nature in increasingly radical ways. After working for a number of years with creatives of this sort, I decided it was time for the law to more robustly join this conversation. So a few years ago, together with some colleagues at NYU, I founded the More Than Human Life program, or MOTH for short. Like Moth to the Flame, a global collective of thinkers and doers have been drawn to the little flicker that we lit with my colleagues at NYU. But it's not only lawyers, but also judges, indigenous leaders, philosophers, writers, storytellers of all kinds. I've never in my professional life seen such fascination, such longing for an idea. And to me, the question is why? Why is it that so many people feel drawn to this idea? One obvious answer is because we're desperately looking for tools, for new ideas to defend the more than human world in the face of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. But what I hear underneath the fascination with the idea of rights of nature is the need for new stories about our relationship with the more than human world. And law is a very powerful storytelling device. Law is the language that we use to tell right from wrong and to determine who counts as a citizen and as a subject of rights. And human rights is a particularly compelling story. In fact, I think it's the most powerful story through which we have imagined and fought for a world where every human being is worthy of equal respect and consideration. The problem with the traditional human rights story is that in our effort to reconnect with one another, we saw it as necessary to disconnect with the web of life. We anointed ourselves as the sole citizens of the earth. We labeled every other form of life as aliens without rights. And we built moral and legal walls to keep them out. So as we become more attuned to the voices of the more than human world, we're starting to respond with a different story. I call this the story of more than human rights. It's a story where non-humans are subjects, not objects, where everything, everybody is considered to be alive and treated as a citizen of the earth. To borrow Robin Wall Kimmer's beautiful sentence, this is a legal grammar of animacy. My hope in proposing this language, this story, is to clarify and add to the language of rights of nature, which I continue to use. The phrase, as Theo said, the phrase more than human was coined by eco-philosopher David Abrams, who's been a generous fellow traveler in the MOTH collective. The idea here is to avoid the language of separation between humans and their quote-unquote environment, between nature and culture. And what I do by extending this story to the law is to emphasize that the rights of humans are entangled with the rights of the more than human world, to use the beautiful term proposed by my fellow traveler and dear friend, Merlin Sheldrick, who has also been key to this effort. I also suggest, finally, the term more than human rights, because we need more than rights. A legal grammar of animacy needs new words, needs to expand the vocabulary that we use beyond the idea and the concept of rights. This is a very old grammar that is alive in many indigenous languages. But it's also present in the roots of some of our words in Western languages that we have forgotten. One of them is responsibility. The reason why I love the idea that we're responding with right, that we're responding to the sounds and the calls of nature, is because responding comes from the same root as responsibility. It means to promise back, to return the favors of nature, as Janine Benyus beautifully said here on this stage yesterday. And it's at its heart, this is an ethics of reciprocity. Reciprocity has the most beautiful origin in Latin. It literally means a back and forth, re-pro. It means going back and forth. It means a dance. Coming from Latin America, this strikes very directly to dancer in me. And I was about to dance here in the green room backstage when listening to the fantastic group that played for us. So the invitation here is to re-engage in that dance, in that movement with nature. And as we do that, to align the laws of societies with the laws of nature. But enough about words, I promised action. So let's move on to action and see how this grammar plays out in practice. After all, the best way to speak a language, to learn a language, is to speak it. We at MOTH learn by doing. We try to be resourceful. We come up with solutions that sometimes feel unfamiliar, even weird. Weirdness is something that we embrace because the weird today is the mainstream tomorrow. And we're resourceful. In fact, the best compliment that we've gotten ever since we started working together at MOTH came from Janine, who said that we were her ninja lawyers. So I'm going to share with you a little sampling of our little ninja tools that we've developed over the years. The first one takes us back to Los Cederos, and it's an experiment about plants. And it started with a song that I'm going to play for you a little clip of now. This is the Los Cederos. You can listen to the whole song. It's called The Song of the Cedars and in any platform. I wish I could just simply play the rest of it and be done with this, but I have to say something about what we did after we composed this song. You may have recognized the sounds of the bats in the background. So this song was composed in a matter of hours. We were there in the high camp of Los Cederos after an exhausting expedition. We're like 5 days in. And we're accompanied by writer Robert McFarland, who's coming out with a fantastically beautiful and achingly beautiful book on rights of nature called Is a River Alive? And that was part of the field work for his book. And also by our dear colleague and friend, Juliana Furci. A mycologist from Chile. We had all come together around the MOTH Collective, and then what we decided in the high camp is when we saw that Rob was doing it the way that he does, just jotting down some lyrics, we added some words to what he was writing, and then Cosmo put music to it and mixed some of the sounds of nature. And right there we realized that the forest was a co-author of the song, that there was no way that could have come together, become fast friends, and be able to compose and then put music to the song without the forest being an active force in the composition of that song. So we decided that we would do the logical thing. Find a legal translation for that idea, that a forest is a co-author of art. And we filed officially a petition before the Copyright Authority of Ecuador, asking that Copyright Authority to acknowledge 5 co-authors of the song, the 4 of us, and the Los Cederos Forest, who's represented in that action by the mayor of Cotacachi, which is the nearby municipality. And we're saying that since the Constitutional Court of Ecuador had declared the forest as a subject of rights, it's only logical that there should be consequences, including the possibility that the forest be a co-author of the song. If the copyright, this is a stretch, but we made a very powerful case, but if the Copyright Authority denies our petition, we're prepared to take it to court and all the way to the Constitutional Court to ask the court to extract the consequences of its own decision to declare the Los Cedros forest as subject of right. Moving from the forest to the ocean, the next experiment, the next legal action has to do with a completely different type of being. Here they are. So these are sperm whales of the Caribbean. These recordings have been made by Project SETI, which is the scientific collective that is farthest along in understanding and potentially decoding the meaning of the language of whales. And by the way, David Gruber, the head of SETI, and I are running a session this afternoon just on this project. And they've published fantastic science showing that sperm whales have highly complex languages, that they have the equivalence of diphthongs, of vowels, and of tones, like in Mandarin. And what we're doing now in our paper that's coming out very soon is to extract again the legal consequences of that understanding. So we are pretty confident that we'll be able to litigate and to initiate legal actions around the world based on this new evidence. For example, affirming that for highly auditory animals like sperm whales, the constant blasting of human sounds under the ocean, from oil extraction, from ship traffic, is equivalent to the violation of our right to be free from torture and cruel treatment. And finally, this is the last experiment that I want to share with you all, which takes us back to the Sarayaku. We've continued to work, as I said, very closely with the Sarayaku. They co-hosted our annual gathering last year, but they always want some action associated with our gatherings, of course. So this is a picture from an expedition we organized last year that brought together Sarayaku indigenous scientists and Western scientists, experts in the underground networks. So these are scientists from the Societies for the Protection of Underground Networks that are embarking on a cartographic mission to map the mycorrhizal networks of the world. They did that together, and I was privileged to carry their equipment for 1 week, and then they anointed me as a field lawyer as a result. And they said, but it was fantastic to see how the deep knowledge of the forest that the Sarayaku traditional knowledge keepers had mapped onto the knowledge that was being obtained through the more kind of contemporary techie tools of mycology. This evidence is going straight to support the Sarayaku campaign and the legal case to declare the whole territory of the Sarayaku people as a legal subject of rights, as a living entity, which is just what the Don Sabino had said 15 years ago. And if you're curious to hear what mycorrhizal networks sound? Okay. So of course there are more noises, there are more sounds of the underground forest, but the fungi are there, very present. I want to close by reminding us that we are at a crossroads. The invitation to reconnect with the more than human world comes at a time when changes in our human societies might suggest that we cannot afford to look beyond the human. I want to be clear, we must continue to advance the rights of humans. Human rights is a project that needs to be sustained, especially now that it is under threat around the world. Yet how we treat each other is intimately related to how we treat the earth. We're capable of violence, discrimination, and exclusion toward the more than human world because we're capable of it within our human societies. But the opposite is just as true. We're capable of treating each other unjustly, even cruelly, because we learn to treat other forms of life that way. As we continue the indispensable work of protecting the rights and dignity of all human beings, I want you to listen deeply to the voices of the more than human world that are becoming louder and louder. And I hope you'll join this planetary listening exercise and the effort to respond with stories of responsibility and reciprocity to protect the more than human world. Thank you.